Okay, welcome back here. Today we're going to be looking at KK4, for those of you who aren't aware. KK4, Howard Becker's interactionist theory of deviance involving the meaning and process of labelling. So symbolic interactionist theory. So interactionists argue that there are no behaviours that are intrinsically deviant. They're not deviant. They suggest that deviant actions are simply those which are defined as deviant within a society. They therefore believe there can be no individuals who are fundamentally deviant. Interactionists argue the behaviour people engage in will sometimes be labelled as deviant by others, and at other times it may be seen as acceptable and or normal. So social reality is constructed through social interactions with others. Therefore, one individual may interpret behaviour as deviant, whereas another may not. Easy example for that, graffiti, art or vandalism. One person sees it as deviant, one group sees it as deviant, the other, in fact, does not. So when we're looking at this particular theory, you have to really look at it goes again at that relative nature on it. The social groups who create the deviance by making the rules, the breaking of which create these, so usually the people in power are the ones who actually get to define what is deviant and what is not. Social groups create deviance by making rules, the breaking of which is considered deviant. They do this by applying these rules to particular people and then labelling them as outsiders. The deviant person and the deviant behaviour are in fact two different things. So the theory really places less emphasis on individual behaviour. It's assumed the individuals are free agents. We can do whatever we want. We construct our own sense of morality, right and wrong, that type of thing. Those who believe in this theory really think it's based upon associational choices, whom we associate with and how these choices influence our life experience and ways of viewing the world determines whether we believe a particular activity is deviant or in fact is not. So it really looks at the influence of your peer groups in determining what is actually deviant or not. No, like I said, no one is inherently deviant, rather you learn to become deviant. This theory, the symbolic interactionist theory, really looks at the fact that the families remains a dominant influence on whether or not the individual conform to societal norms or not, or actually participate in deviant activity. So I've talked about another class of smacking. So some parents are absolutely opposed to the physical punishment of children, such as smacking, while other parents regularly use physical punishment to enforce rules. Are parents who smack their children actually deviant? The answer really depends upon what is considered acceptable behaviour within that given household or within the greater society in which the family lives. Although to many smacking is inherently neither right or wrong, it is often subject to the harsh punishment of actually others. The United Nations, for instance, and many countries within there have condemned smacking, while other nations see it as an acceptable form of practice. So this brings us to labelling. So labelling is a sociological theory that suggests no status or behaviour is inherently deviant until other people have judged it and categorised as so. Labelling can really be damaging both in the short term and long term to individuals and to society. Labelling, as I said, the imposition of the stereotyped identity by influential members in society as social control over an individual group or marginalised groups, because then they decide what is the norm or the appropriate behaviour. Anything outside that is deviant is labelled as so and are marginalised, sent to the outside and treated differently as such. Labelling does occur and start early in life with schoolyard taunts, name calling, ugly, fat, geek, dumb. They have a massive effect on a child's self-esteem. So it has a really negative effect, and from a sociological point of view, obviously it's not a fantastic outcome. The process starts judging, defining behaviour, thoughts, feelings, beliefs, conditions against acceptable norms. It's really that socialising of what to actually is acceptable behaviour, the taunts, the judging of what other behaviour outside the social norm is seen as deviant. That labelling process really has a negative impact upon people. So, think about different scenarios. A young woman is caught shoplifting from a supermarket. Is the behaviour labelled or is the individual labelled? A person is admitted to a psychiatric hospital after having an emotional breakdown. Think about the behaviour versus the actual individual. Who is labelled? What is labelled? The behaviour, again, or the individual? So we really have to look at labelling as something that has a really negative impact upon society. The consequences of labelling on a group or individual can be quite serious, as it can actually lead to further deviance. For example, a person who has been labelled as a criminal or addict may not be able to shake off this perception and actually further begin to embody those expectations, which lead to further deviance. Self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm told I'm a criminal or a deviant, so therefore I might as well act as such and continue participating in further deviance or criminal activity. So there's some strengths and limitations to Becker's theory. So I'll just get it out there for a second. The main one in which a strength of Becker's theory is labelling is that no act itself is deviant. It only becomes deviant when people actually label it as such. Again, deviance occurs across social classes as well, but those in the lower class, a lower socioeconomic background, can be considered more deviant because, again, it's the upper class, those with the authority and power, they're the ones who are actually doing the labelling or make up the rules, so therefore they are less likely to be marginalised because they make the rules. If you make the rules, you're not going to be seen, your own behaviour is not going to be seen to be deviant, it's going to be others' behaviour. A limitation on the Becker's theory of labelling is its relativity. For example, the same action can be labelled differently depending on who's reacting to it. Becker's theory fails to recognise examples of widespread condemnation such as incest and murder, regardless of who actually performs the action or reacts to it. So, really, when we compare it to other types of theory, this is really very much a relative theory, but I really want you to take away from this the labelling aspect of it and the impact that can actually have. So what we'll actually do is we'll actually make a comparison between the three theories we've studied when we're looking at our case study, for example, or the research report that we're going to take. So you'll be looking at Becker, which we've just looked at, the social interactionist theory. You'll be looking at Durkheim, and you'll be looking at Hershey, which we covered in the last couple of days as well. Okay. All right, that should do me, I think. So we're going to be looking at the Deviance research report or case study next week. What I would like you to do, I recommend page 132 of your textbook. Have a read through that in relation to Becker's theory. It's only about a page and a half, and we'll go through some activities related to that in tomorrow, that being Thursday, July the 26th class. As always, like and subscribe. Catch you later.